Again, got a few sleepy faces, a few smiling faces, a few that are probably going to cry here in a few minutes. And I'm not talking about the babies. No, we are glad to be here today. It's good to be here. Tell you what, I went out to put stuff in the car, and whoo, it is hot inside that car. But thankful that the Lord sent rain yesterday. We needed that. I tell you what, after listening to Acts this morning and going back to the book of Genesis where Stephen was talking about that 7 years of drought, I can only imagine a time when you go that long with little to no rain. That would be horrible, horrible, horrible. We are, again, thankful to be here and glad that the Lord has allowed us to come together. We're going to go ahead and go back to the book of Psalms this afternoon. Psalms chapter 17. Psalms chapter 17. We had really, I skipped 16. I didn't really skip it. We had just went through 16 because it's quoted in all of the different, as we went through Matthew and as we went through even beginning in Acts, there's several places there where we already kind of covered chapter 16. So we're going to go ahead and move on to Psalms chapter 17. Psalms chapter 17. For those of you that don't have one of the superscriptions above it, this one says a prayer of David, okay? A prayer of David. The neat thing about Psalms, when you look at them, they're not just songs. They are often prayers. There's different kinds of psalms, right? There's praise psalms, there's prayer psalms, there's different kinds. And this is defined as a prayer of David, okay? Psalms chapter 17. It says, "Hear the right, O Lord, attend unto my cry, give ear unto my prayer that goeth not out of feigned lips. Let my sentence come forth from thy presence. Let thine eyes behold the things that are equal. Thou hast proved mine heart. Thou hast visited me in the night. Thou hast tried me and shalt find nothing. I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. Concerning the works of men, by the word of thy lips, I have kept from me the paths of the destroyer. Hold up my goings in thy paths, that my footsteps slip not. I have called upon thee, for thou wilt hear me, O God. Incline thine ear unto me, and hear my speech. Show thy marvelous loving kindness, O thou that savest by thy right hand them which put their trust in thee from those that rise up against them. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. From the wicked that oppress me, from the deadly enemies who compass me about. They are enclosed in their own fat. With their mouth they speak proudly. They have now compassed us in our steps. They have set their eyes bowing down to the earth, like as a lion that is greedy of his prey, as it were a young lion lurking in the secret places. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down. Deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. From men which are thy hand, O Lord, from men of the world, which have their portion in this life, and whose belly thou fillest with thy hid treasure. They are full of children, they leave the rest of their substance to their babes. As for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness." All right. Psalm chapter 17, it's interesting when you read it. And if you read different commentaries and different people that are talking about Psalm chapter 17, there's going to be those that fall in the camp of saying, well, because of a couple sentences in here, this can't be anybody but Jesus that this is about, right? Because it says, thou hast proved me, you'll find nothing, my mouth shall not transgress. And so there's some that read this and say, well, this is a prayer of David, but he must have written this as if it's talking about Jesus Christ. From a perspective of sheer perfectness, correct. There is only one and has only been one, and that is Jesus Christ. I think Jesus Christ probably could have prayed this. There are some, interesting as I read some of the different books, There are some that believe this is what Jesus prayed whenever he was sweating great drops of blood. That as he was there getting ready, that this is what he prayed, right? Because there were so many coming against him, and he was perfect of heart and had not sinned, and that this might be what he had prayed while he was there. Could be. Could he pray this in that level of detail, with that level of perfectness? Absolutely he could have, right? But the Gospels don't tell us that. So be careful whenever you start to make too many assumptions. The Gospels do not tell us that Jesus read this prayer, that he quoted this chapter. Could he? Yes. He fulfills this perfectly. There are those that will say, look, this is just simply David when he is running from Saul or one of his other enemies. And it's not that David was saying that he was perfect like God is perfect, but that in the trial that was in front of him, in the thing that Saul was accusing him of, he was not guilty. So do I believe that David could have written this, prayed this, sang this? I do. Yeah, absolutely. So whichever camp that you fall in, whether you believe that this is not David because he couldn't have fulfilled this, or that it is David and it's from a practical perspective. I have an opinion, and I'll tell you what my opinion is. I will also tell you that in the end, be careful, because if you're not, you're going to miss many of the main points that are given in this psalm. If you get too wrapped up about, was it David or was it somebody else or was it a prophecy of Jesus Christ, okay? I personally believe that this is a prayer of David. Literally, the superscription above it says, a prayer of David. I believe that as you read through this, you will see this is somebody that is under great oppression, but that is trying to faithfully serve God, and they are looking forward to the day when they are risen and are in His presence new. Right? That last verse, as for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness. I believe that this is David. Now, Jesus Christ could pray this prayer and in full perfectness and completeness, and I have no issue with that at all. I just happen to believe that this is a prayer of David, like it says it is. Okay? So, let's start back up at the top and let's talk about how this chapter lays out. It says, hear the right, O Lord, attend unto my cry, give ear unto my prayer that goeth not out of feigned lips. When it says hear the right, what do you think that means? Okay? You're here today, you're listening, you want to learn, you want to worship the Lord. It's important that we understand what it says, right? Hear the right. It brings with it this idea of seeing what is right. Hear the truth of the matter, right? Lord, I want you to hear the truth, see the truth. Attend unto my cry, give ear unto my prayer. He is asking the Lord to hear him. He is coming to the Lord with a burden. How many times when we pray, right? I think this is actually probably a prayer that we understand really well, because we're really good in praying to the Lord for the things when we're in trouble. Right? Well, this is a man who is, by the time you get to the end, you realize that his enemies have surrounded him and are lurking like lions, just can't wait to get their claws in him. You ever been there? Do you ever feel like that? You ever feel like the enemies are circling and they're just waiting for you to trip. They're just waiting for you to turn your back so they can dig their claws into you. Listen, that's where he was. And so whenever he goes to the Lord, he feels like this is unjust. He feels like he is not being justly treated. He's being accused of something that he hasn't done. And he asks the Lord to hear the right of the matter and to listen to his cry. That word attend there means to prick up the ears. So when he says, attend unto my cry, he's saying, Lord, listen. Listen, hear me, Lord, hear me. Hear my cry, give ear unto my prayer. It goeth not out of feigned lips. Now, especially thinking about the younger ones here, because we don't use this word. You know what feigned lips means? Lying and deceitful lips. Well, you say, well, wait a minute. This is David. He's not lying and deceitful. That's right. What did he say? It goes not out of feigned lips. He says, Lord, what I'm saying is the truth. My prayer to you, my plea to you, to look at my case and to judge righteously is coming from my heart. No lying, no deceit, no trickery. Lord, I need your help. I need you to plead my cause, my case. Verse 2, listen, when I say I'm using words like plead and justice and judgment, that's actually, if you understand the words that the psalmists are using, that is actually the message that he's carrying. The next verse says, let my sentence come from thy presence. That word sentence is the idea of a verdict. Listen, he is going to God. You understand how he feels right now. He truly feels like he is in the right. He has not done this thing that he's being pursued for, that he's being accused of, that he's on judgment for. And he literally goes to God and says, hear me, and Lord, let my verdict come from you. He knows that the only true judge is God. He's the only judge that will always judge perfectly. And he throws himself at the judgment of God, basically. So he throws himself down and says, let my judgment come from you. Let my verdict of guilty or innocent, let it come from you. He says, let my sentence come forth from thy presence. Let thine eyes behold the things that are equal. He knows that it's God that judges righteously and fairly and justly. The balanced scales, right? If you've seen the scales, right? And if the weight it does this, right? Well, God's judgment is always perfect. It's a balanced scale. It says in verse 3, thou hast proved my heart. Thou hast visited me in the night. Thou hast tried me, and shalt find nothing. I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. Man, there's so much in this verse here. Thou hast proved mine heart. You know what that word proved is? It's the idea of tested. Tested. It was interesting as I was reading one of the commentaries, and I don't remember which one it was. Phillips, maybe. It was interesting because he was recounting somebody that had went and watched them refine gold. And he had basically said that like whenever they would mash it up into a powder, right? Because it had a lot of impurities in it, had rock in it. And you had to mash it up, and then you'd take that stuff you'd mashed up and you'd put it in a furnace and you'd heat it up until everything melted, and the junk would, with gold's case, the junk would maybe float to the bottom and the gold's on the top, and you'd skim the gold off. And then you'd run it through the furnace again. And then whenever the guy that was doing it was done, and he'd say, okay, this is pure gold. Well, then the guy that took it from him, the assayer would look at it and he would melt it down again. And they'd say, well, why are you melting it down? It's already been declared pure. And they'd say, well, we're proving it. We're testing it. It's that idea of when it says prove me, you've proven me, you've tested me. You've tested me and you know where my heart is. You know where my heart is. You visited me in the night. Thou hast tried me. That word tried there is the idea of refining metal. Lord, you have melted me down and you've scraped that junk out, and you've melted me down and you've scraped that junk out. Lord, you've refined me. That's what he means when he says you have tried me and shalt find nothing. The idea here is that when he puts himself at the judgment of God, and he says, look, I'm coming with unfeigned lips. I'm coming speaking the truth. I am not guilty of this thing, Lord. You've tried me. You've proven me. You've refined me. And when you melted me down and you went to scrape the junk off, it's not there. Like you didn't find lying in my lips. He goes on and he makes a declaration in the last half of verse 3. I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. You know, listen, you and me and David himself, we know this from his own life. Me and you and our life, we are going to slip and we are going to fall and we are going to make mistakes. We are going to sin. I've been bought and paid for by the blood of Jesus Christ. I have a new man living in me. Listen, I am redeemed. I am not yet perfect. Far from it. I make mistakes. I sin. Listen, every one of us sitting in this room and the man that wrote these words was a sinner. However, what I love about David, one of the things I love about David, he wanted to serve God. He wanted to avoid sin. He wanted to stay away from those things. And you often see him using words like this. I have purposed in my heart. That's the type of thing that David would say. You know what? We talk about wanting to live right and wanting to serve God. It's not something that we can accomplish as we just casually decide that we're going to do it. We need to be committed to it. We need to be committed to it. It takes effort. It takes work. It takes dedication. It takes renewing of our mind. It takes digging into the Scriptures. It takes prayer. But he says, I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. He's already said, I am speaking to you, Lord. I am crying out to you with unfeigned lips. I am not lying. I am being honest. And he also goes on to say, I have purposed, I will not transgress with my mouth. Lord, I want to speak the truth. Verse 4, concerning the works of men, by the word of thy lips, I have kept me from the paths of the destroyer. Lord, when it comes to the things of men and the things that come from your word and your lips, I am working to be right. I am working to avoid sin. I am working to stay away from the things and the traps of Satan and the destroyer. And Lord, I want to be yours. Like I said, listen, we're going to make mistakes. David made mistakes. But you aren't going to be anywhere near what you need to be until you purpose in your heart to work at it. And that to the best of your ability, you are going to follow the words of God and avoid the paths of the destroyer. Starting in verse 5, he talks a little bit less about the proving and the trying and his declaration of what he's trying to do. And he moves into more about the things of God. He says, hold up my goings in the paths and thy footsteps, that my footsteps slip not. Listen, as he's going in verse 5, he's suddenly turning back, and he's not just talking about that God's proved him and God's tried him, but he's saying, Lord, this is what I need your help with. I have purposed to do what's right. And Lord, I am trying to stay away from the paths of the destroyer. Lord, I need you to hold me up, right? Hold up my goings in thy paths, that my footsteps slip not. Do you see where the psalmist understands where his strength comes from, right? Yeah, he's saying, look, as an individual, I have purposed to be right. I have purposed to not follow after of men. I have purposed to follow thy words. I have purposed not to get off into the path of the destroyer. But Lord, I need you to hold me up. I need you to direct my footsteps so that I don't slip and fall. Me and you, we need to be dedicated to trying to serve him. But understand, you won't do it on your own. You can't do it on your own. In your dedication and setting yourself aside to serve God, remember where your strength comes from. He says in verse 6, I have called upon thee, for thou wilt hear me. I love the confidence in that statement. I called on you, and I know you will hear me, O God. Incline thine ear unto me, and hear my speech. His prayer is that the Lord would lift him up, keep him in his paths, help his feet not to slip, that the Lord would hear him. And then he says this in verse 7, show thy marvelous loving kindness. What is his prayer? Lord, I need your loving kindness. I need your mercy. Show me your loving kindness. Hold me up. Keep my feet in the right path. And Lord, let me see your loving kindness. But he states this in the last half of verse 7. O thou that savest by thy right hand, the right hand of power. Lord, I know you save. And then he says this, them which put their trust in thee. Who does the Lord save? Those that put their trust in him. Hey, listen, the psalmist has said, I've purposed in my heart, I'm going to do what's right. Lord, you've tried me and you know in this matter that I am justified. Lord, I'm going to work on your paths and stay in your paths. But then he comes back and says, I need your strength to do it. I need you to keep my foot from slipping. I need to see your loving kindness. Lord, I know that you save those that trust in you. The psalmist is putting his trust in the Lord. Who are you trusting? Who are you trusting? It's a good question that we should regularly ask ourselves. I'm not talking about trusting the Lord in salvation. I'm talking about if you're here today and you're saved, who are you trusting as you get up in the morning and go do the things that you need to do? As you want to be what's right to your kids, to your spouse, to those you work with, to your friends, to your family, who are you putting your trust in? As you have problems and trials in life and you don't understand why this is happening and how is it that people can treat me this way, this isn't fair, who are you trusting? He says in verse 7, the Lord is the one that can save those that trust in thee. And who is it saving them from? From those that rise up against them. The psalmist here knows that he has enemies that have risen up against him, and he knows that it's only the Lord that can deliver him from them. Verse 8 is interesting. It's actually what I gave Cece as the title for the message. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Have you ever heard that phrase, apple of the eye? Like I've heard that all my life at different things. You know, until I was a grown adult, well into being a grown adult, I had no clue what it actually was, right? I mean, I got the idea. Like, you know, hey, when you told somebody you're the apple of my eye, well, I mean, it's obviously a good thing, right? I mean, we say it in such endearing terms, you know, Tanya's the apple of my eye. Well, what does that even mean? If you look up the words, the Hebrew words, and you do a little bit of research, what you come to is that it's talking about like the very pupil of your eye and how precious it is. And have you ever noticed how your eyes work? You know, if I was to walk up to Sierra right now and just try to poke my finger in her eye, you know what would happen? Without her even thinking about it, her eyelid would shut. Keep me as the apple of thine eye. The word keep here brings with it that idea of hedging about. Be a protective cover. So when it says, keep me as the apple of thy eye, it means just like that precious eye, your precious eye, the pupil of your eye, and the way your eyelid closes around it to keep it safe. Anytime even the wind blows and a dust particle starts to get, man, your eye is like that. Keep me as the apple of thine eye. You see how precious that seems to be. And it's like this guiding hedge around it, right? Keep me. Keep me as the apple of the eye. And hide me under the shadow of thy wings. You know, you think about the shadow. Brother Wayne always tells the story about as he was growing up and they raised chickens, and you know, the mother would be out there, the mother hen would be out there, and the little chicks would be running around, and there'd be a hawk that would start to fly around, and that mother would start to cluck, and those chicks would run up, and she'd fluff out her feathers, and she'd sit down on them, and you couldn't see them